Ryan's office revenge. I held my hand out, ready to greet the new CEO. That was all it took for the chairman to decide I didn't belong at his table. He didn't even look at my face first. He looked at my hand, then at the folder under my arm, then at the flowers I was carrying. White lilies and eucalyptus, the kind someone's assistant orders when they want the room to look welcoming for a big announcement. The cameras were already rolling. Red light on. 3 angles. One for the internal stream, one for the external investors, one for the archive no one thinks about until there's a scandal. I stepped up beside his chair, extended my hand toward the incoming CEO and said, "Welcome to Northbridge." Before Lucas Meyer could react, the chairman turned his head, took in my gesture, and gave a small scoff into his lapel mic. "I don't shake hands with low-level employees," he said, loud enough to be crystal clear in the room and on every live feed. "My name is Mason Brooks. I'm 48 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, was the managing partner of Brooks Strategic Capital. My father used to say that respect isn't earned in drops and lost in buckets. It's the foundation you either build on or watch crumble beneath you. He learned that in the jungles of Vietnam. I learned it in the boardrooms of corporate America. Before I ever touched a financial statement, I spent 12 years as a Marine Corps infantry officer. 2 deployments in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. You learn things in combat that Harvard Business School doesn't teach. You learn that leadership isn't about the loudest voice in the room. You learn that respect flows both ways, regardless of rank. And you learn that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. My father, Colonel William Brooks, came home from Vietnam in 1971 with a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and a simple philosophy. If you're going to trust people with something important, watch how they treat the people who can't help them first. He applied that principle when he started Brooks Strategic Capital in 1975. Small deals at first, regional businesses, family money. But he had a nose for character, and character, it turned out, was a better predictor of success than most financial metrics. When I got out of the Corps in 2008, Dad was ready to step back. The firm had grown beyond his comfort zone. Institutional money, billion-dollar deals, international exposure. "It needs someone who understands how the world works now," he told me. "But don't forget why we started this." I never did. Every deal we structured, every partnership we entered, came with what we called the Brooks Standard. We don't just bet on business models, we bet on the people running them. And if those people can't demonstrate basic human decency when they think nobody important is watching, then they don't get our money. That standard had cost us deals over the years, plenty of them. But it had also saved us from spectacular failures, the kind that make headlines and end careers, the kind where you wake up reading about congressional investigations and wonder how you missed the warning signs. 3 months ago, Northbridge Holdings came across my desk during what I'd started thinking of as my final major transaction. At 48, with my son finishing his MBA at Wharton, I was planning my own succession timeline. This deal would either cement Brooks Strategic's reputation for the next generation or teach me some expensive lessons about the price of principle. Northbridge was a conglomerate of mid-market businesses, logistics, industrial services, a tech platform they couldn't explain clearly even in their own materials. Their outgoing CEO had spent 5 years acquiring companies like Souvenirs, leveraging the balance sheet, and cutting operational muscle instead of fat. Now they needed cash and credibility to survive. We structured a $2.5 billion commitment across multiple tranches. Not just our money, we were leading a consortium of institutional investors who trusted our due diligence. The personal stakes couldn't have been higher. My son, Michael Brooks, had actually been recruited by Northbridge for their management trainee program. He was considering it seriously, seeing it as a way to learn the business from a different angle before potentially joining the family firm. "Dad, their executive development program is supposed to be top tier," he'd told me over dinner 2 weeks before the closing meeting. "And working somewhere else first might make me a better partner for you eventually." I'd encouraged him to explore his options. Now I was about to see exactly what kind of organization might be shaping his early career. The deal included our standard conduct integrity provision, but this time I'd insisted on something extra. Any documented behavior during negotiations that materially harmed reputational standing would trigger not just capital withdrawal, but a full network freeze. Brooks Strategic had spent 47 years building relationships in the investment community. One call from me could blacklist a management team across multiple firms. It wasn't theoretical. 2 years earlier, we'd walked away from a $600 million infrastructure deal when video surfaced of their chairman humiliating a line worker at a public meeting. We lost fees, time, and energy. But 6 months later, when that company imploded under regulatory scrutiny and union actions, every institutional investor who'd followed our lead privately thanked us for the early warning. This time felt different, though. Bigger stakes, more scrutiny, and the added complexity of family considerations. If this deal went sideways, it wouldn't just affect Brooks Strategic's reputation. It would affect Michael's career prospects in an industry where reputations follow you forever. That's why I'd insisted on attending the transition meeting personally, despite my team's suggestions to send a representative. I needed to see how Northbridge's leadership operated when they thought the hard work was done and the cameras were mostly ceremonial. The invitation had been formal: board strategy session and CEO transition announcement. They hadn't put my name on the attendee list, just Brooks Strategic Representative TBD. My partner Cole Henderson had raised an eyebrow at that. "They don't know you're coming," he'd observed. "They will," I'd said. As I boarded the flight that morning, I'd gotten a text from Michael. "Dad, heard Northbridge is announcing their new CEO today. Mom says you're flying out there personally. Everything okay?" I'd typed back, "Just want to see what we're investing in. Talk tonight." I had no idea I was about to discover exactly what kind of company had been recruiting my son. The flight gave me time to think about what my father would have made of this situation. He'd built Brooks Strategic on a simple Marine Corps principle: reconnaissance before engagement. Know your terrain. Know your enemy. Know your exit strategy. He'd drilled it into me during my early years at the firm. "Son, the minute you stop paying attention to character, character starts paying attention to you." I landed at noon, changed in the airport lounge, and took a car straight to Northbridge's downtown headquarters. 42 floors of glass and steel, the kind of building that screams successful corporate from 3 blocks away. The lobby was all marble, chrome, and digital displays. Share price ticker on one wall. Corporate video loop on another showing smiling workers and aerial shots of distribution centers. The receptionist looked up as I approached. Young, professional, practiced smile. "Welcome to Northbridge. How may I help you? Mason Brooks for the board meeting." Her fingers paused over the keyboard for just a beat too long. Then she typed quickly. "Of course, Mr. Brooks. Someone from Investor Relations will be right down." Investor Relations. Not executive services, not the board liaison. That told me everything I needed to know about how they saw this visit. In the Marines, we called it misreading the battlefield. It usually didn't end well. A few minutes later, Ian Sullivan appeared. Mid-30s, expensive suit that didn't quite fit right. Energy of someone trying too hard to project confidence. "Mr. Brooks, great to meet you. I'll take you right up." The elevator ride was instructive. Ian filled the silence with nervous chatter about the exciting day ahead and historic partnership opportunities. When I asked about the board's mood, he hesitated before landing on eager and optimistic. "And the outgoing CEO?" I asked. "Grateful for the opportunity to transition," he said carefully. "It's been a collaborative process." Military translation. Someone got pushed out and wasn't happy about it. The executive floor was quieter, thicker carpet, better art. Ian led me past framed photos of corporate milestones, ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, handshake photos with politicians and business leaders. The kind of wall that says, "We matter to visitors, and remember when we mattered to employees." We stopped outside double glass doors marked Boardroom A. 2 cameras mounted above. Red lights currently dark. "For the live stream," Ian explained when he caught me looking. "Chairman Patterson wanted full transparency for this transition." Patterson. I'd done my homework on Owen Patterson during the due diligence phase. Early 60s, classic East Coast establishment type. Wharton MBA, McKinsey consultant, 3 previous CEO positions at mid-tier companies. His LinkedIn profile was a masterpiece of corporate speak, all about transformational leadership and stakeholder value optimization. What the research hadn't captured was character. Numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole truth either. You need to see people in action to understand who they really are. Ian opened the doors, and I stepped inside. The boardroom looked like it had been ordered from the executive power section of a corporate furniture catalog. 20-foot table, high-backed leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Wall-mounted screens already displaying the opening slide, Northbridge Holdings, Leadership Transition, and Strategic Partnership. A few people were already seated. Owen Patterson at the head of the table, holding court with 2 board members. Lucas Meyer, the incoming CEO, halfway down the table studying a presentation deck. Communications team in the back setting up streaming equipment. In the corner, on a side credenza, sat a flower arrangement. White lilies and eucalyptus. The same arrangement I'd approved when Brooks Strategic agreed to sponsor refreshments and decor for the event. A nice touch, except they'd clearly expected their capital partner to send someone junior enough to handle flower delivery. "They asked me to bring those in," I mentioned to Ian, nodding toward the arrangement. He picked up the flowers and handed them to me without question. "Perfect. Chairman Patterson likes attention to details like that." The chairman of the board commanded attention even while sitting. Owen Patterson had that particular brand of confidence that comes from never being told a no by anyone who mattered. Sharp suit, perfect posture, smile that stopped just short of his eyes. He was currently explaining something to the directors beside him, using hand gestures that suggested the topic was either very important or very obvious. As I approached the table, carrying the flowers, I caught fragments of their conversation. Regional partners understand the hierarchy here. Important to set the right tone from day one. Know their place in the structure. Owen glanced up as I got closer, taking in the flowers first, then my suit, then my lack of obvious corporate credentials. No company badge, no banker's folder, no entourage of junior staff. Just a middle-aged guy in a good suit carrying an arrangement someone had asked him to deliver. "Perfect," he said. "Not to me, but about me." "Set those on the side table." I placed the flowers on the main table instead, within his sight line, but not where he'd directed. A small test. Owen noticed but didn't comment, turning back to his conversation about managing expectations. Lucas Meyer looked up from his presentation materials as I approached. Younger than I'd expected. Late 30s. Good haircut, expensive watch, eyes that held just a trace of uncertainty beneath the polished exterior. He'd been recruited from a competitor, specifically to clean up the previous CEO's acquisition spree. What Lucas didn't know yet was that my son Michael had been recruited by that same competitor 6 months earlier and turned them down. Culture felt off, Michael had told me. Great opportunities on paper, but something about the way they talked about people. I extended my hand toward Lucas. "Welcome to Northbridge," I said. "I'm Mason." That's when Owen Patterson showed me exactly what kind of leader he was, exactly what kind of organization he ran, and exactly why my son would never work there. Before Lucas could respond, Owen turned his attention our way. He saw my gesture, saw an opportunity to establish hierarchy, and decided to make it crystal clear to everyone in the room, including the cameras that had just started recording, where a flower-carrying nobody belonged in his corporate universe. He leaned slightly toward his microphone, smile widening, and delivered the line that would cost his company $2.5 billion. "I don't shake hands with low-level employees." The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. I don't shake hands with low-level employees. In the Marines, we had a saying: the first shot tells you where the enemy is. The second shot tells you who they are. Owen Patterson had just fired both barrels. The reaction was immediate and telling. A board member to Owen's right chuckled reflexively, the kind of nervous laugh that says, "I know this is wrong, but I'm not brave enough to say it." Someone halfway down the table made a sound that could have been amusement or discomfort. A communications staffer at the back covered his mouth with a folder, but his eyes were wide with the recognition that this was going out live. Lucas Meyer, the incoming CEO, didn't laugh. He looked from my extended hand to Owen, then down at the table like he'd suddenly found the agenda fascinating. He didn't correct the chairman. He didn't say, "That's inappropriate." He just studied his notes and waited for the moment to pass. I kept my hand extended, not out of stubbornness, but because 12 years of military training had taught me something about power dynamics that Owen Patterson had apparently missed. When someone shows you disrespect publicly, your response defines not just the moment, but every interaction that follows. Owen noticed I hadn't withdrawn my hand. His smile faltered just slightly, like he'd expected immediate compliance and was mildly annoyed by my failure to read the script. "I'm here as instructed," I said, keeping my voice level. "Military bearing," my father would have called it. "Calm under fire." Owen leaned back in his chair, making no effort to hide his contempt. "Then stand where you're told," he replied. "This meeting is for executives." In that moment, I thought about Michael. 25 years old, MBA from Wharton, smart enough to see through corporate BS, but young enough to think he could change it from the inside. He'd been genuinely excited about Northbridge's management program, impressed by their growth numbers and development track record. Now I was watching the chairman of that company demonstrate exactly what kind of leadership culture Michael would be walking into. The kind where respect was conditional, where hierarchy mattered more than human dignity, and where public humiliation was apparently an acceptable management tool. I lowered my hand slowly, placed the flowers deliberately on the table within Owen's sightline, and walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table. No nameplate waiting for me. No official recognition of my role. "Perfect. Let's begin," Owen announced, already turning toward the main screen. The opening slide appeared. Northbridge Holdings, Leadership Transition and Strategic Partnership. He launched into his prepared remarks about historic partnerships and strategic alignment. Standard corporate theater, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never had his assumptions challenged in a room that mattered. I listened, watching not just Owen but the dynamics around the table. Who nodded along? Who checked their phones? Who seemed uncomfortable with the tone he'd set? In military intelligence, we called it battlefield assessment, understanding not just the primary target, but the entire operational environment. 3 slides in, I spoke up. Before you go further, I said, loud enough to cut through Owen's momentum, there's one thing you should know. Owen turned, visibly irritated by the interruption. We're not taking commentary from support staff during this session, he said. You can submit feedback through proper channels afterward. If you're refusing to shake my hand, I replied, maintaining the same level tone, then by tomorrow morning, $2.5 billion will no longer be part of this deal. The silence that followed wasn't the dramatic gasp of Hollywood boardrooms. It was the vacuum that forms when reality suddenly shifts beneath everyone's feet. Phones stopped moving. Pens froze mid-sentence. Eyes darted between Owen and me like spectators at a tennis match where someone had just served a grenade. Someone laughed after a beat, forced, too loud, trying to snap the room back to its script. All right, a director said. Let's keep this professional. Owen's smile returned, brittle around the edges. Save the theatrics, he said. Capital deployment is being handled through proper channels. I am the proper channel, I replied. You could feel the shift in the room's energy. Subtle, but unmistakable. The way conversations pause when someone important enters a restaurant, or how a crowd moves when they realize they're standing next to someone famous. Not recognition yet, but the first stirring of doubt about assumptions they'd made. Reed Thompson, the CFO, looked up from his notes with the expression of someone doing rapid mental calculations. He glanced at me, then at Owen, then back at his paperwork. Before we proceed, he said carefully, we should confirm final authorization protocols for the capital commitment. Legal will handle documentation, Owen snapped, waving off the concern. With respect, Reed continued, the release requires direct confirmation from the authorized signatory. Not legal review, direct confirmation. His eyes found mine across the table. Professional recognition passing between us like a coded signal. That would be me, I said quietly. Owen's head swiveled back to me, really looking this time. Not at the flowers, not at my seating, arrangement, but at my face. Processing, calculating. You're claiming authority over the capital deployment? He asked slowly. I'm not claiming anything, I said. I'm Mason Brooks, managing partner of Brooks Strategic Capital. I have sole signatory authority over our $2.5 billion commitment, which represents the cornerstone investment that makes your entire refinancing structure possible. The silence this time was different. Not confusion, but the rapid mental adjustment that happens when people realize they've badly misread a situation, when they understand that the power dynamic they'd assumed was exactly backwards. Lucas Meyer leaned forward for the first time since I'd entered the room. How much discretion are we talking about? Complete discretion, I said. Brooks Strategic leads a consortium of institutional investors. Our participation triggers the other commitments. Our withdrawal. I paused, letting them finish the thought. Our withdrawal unravels everything. Reed was nodding. Now, confirming what his financial models had told him, but what nobody had thought to mention in the executive briefings. Owen straightened in his chair, trying to regain control of his narrative. Perhaps we should restart with proper introductions, he said, his voice careful now. If you'd like, I replied. But it was too late. The damage was done, and Owen Patterson was about to learn that in the investment world, just like in the military, respect isn't something you can demand after you've proven you don't deserve it. But Owen Patterson wasn't done digging his own grave. Instead of acknowledging his mistake and trying to salvage the situation, he doubled down. This meeting is about strategic alignment, he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of irritation. Not about introductory protocols. We can handle proper acknowledgements after we cover the substantive material. In the Marines, we had a term for this: continuing to advance while taking fire. Sometimes it's heroic. Sometimes it's just stupid. The key is knowing which one you're doing. Reed Thompson, the CFO, was frantically flipping through his folders. "Owen," he said carefully, "perhaps we should review the conduct provisions before—" "We've reviewed everything," Owen cut him off. "This is about execution now, not about revisiting boilerplate language." Reed found the page he was looking for. "The conduct integrity provision," he said, reading aloud. "Any documented behavior during negotiations that materially harms the reputational standing of the company or incoming leadership triggers immediate capital withdrawal rights." A board member looked up from his copy. "It doesn't require intent," he said slowly. "Just impact and documentation. This meeting is being live-streamed," another director pointed out, glancing toward the cameras. Owen waved dismissively. "We're talking about hypotheticals, professional discourse. This isn't some sensitivity training session. That's when I made my decision. Not because of the money." Brooks Strategic had weathered bigger losses than this. Not because of the disrespect, though that stung. I made the decision because I finally saw clearly what kind of organization this was, what kind of leadership culture they'd built, and what would happen to bright young people like my son if they walked into this environment believing they could change it from within. "I need to make a call," I said, standing up. Owen didn't even look at me. "We'll be continuing the presentation." I walked to the small alcove near the service elevator and pulled out my phone. One number, no hesitation. Cole Henderson picked up on the second ring. "How's it going?" "Activate the withdrawal clause," I said. "Effective immediately. Full amount." There was a pause. Cole had been my partner for 8 years, had seen me walk away from deals before, but never at this scale, never this late in the process. "All $2.5 billion?" he asked. "All of it. Reason code, conduct violation during formal negotiations. Documentation is being live-streamed as we speak. Understood. I'll execute the protocols now." Another pause. "You sure about this, Mason?" I thought about my father, about the Bronze Star citation that hung in his study, about the principles he'd built this firm on. I thought about Michael, about the excitement in his voice when he'd talked about Northbridge's opportunities. I thought about what I'd tell him tonight when he asked how the meeting went. "I'm sure," I said. "Roger that. Withdrawal executing now." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, feeling the familiar calm that comes after making a decision you know is right, regardless of the cost. When I walked back into the boardroom, Owen was mid-presentation, clicking through slides about operational synergies and market positioning, all built on an assumption of capital that no longer existed. I took my seat and placed my phone face down on the table. The red recording light was still on. Everything that happened next would be documented, preserved, analyzed. Reed was presenting the financial projections when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face changed color. The words died in his throat. Another phone buzzed. Then another. A low electronic chorus spreading across the table like ripples from a dropped stone. "Let's silence devices," Owen said sharply. "We're in the middle of critical material." Reed wasn't moving to silence anything. He was staring at his screen like someone had just told him his house was on fire. "Reed," Owen said, "is there an issue?" Reed swallowed hard. "The Brooks Strategic Commitment," he said quietly. "It's been withdrawn." The silence wasn't dramatic this time. It was the silence of a machine suddenly losing power, of systems shutting down in sequence. "Withdrawn how?" Owen asked. "We're in active negotiations." "Executed," Reed said. "Confirmed withdrawal. Full $2.5 billion. Effective immediately." "That's not possible," a board member said. We have agreements. Timelines. We had agreements, Reed corrected. The conduct clause allows for immediate withdrawal under specific circumstances. Lucas Meyer looked directly at me for the first time since the handshake moment. Did you authorize this? Yes, I said simply. Owen stood up, trying to reassert control. This is completely unacceptable. You'll reverse this immediately. There's nothing to reverse, I said. It's done. The board won't stand for this kind of manipulation, he said. The board doesn't control Brooks Strategic's money, I replied. You were being offered access to it under clearly defined conditions. You violated those conditions in front of cameras, in front of your incoming CEO, during a formal negotiation session. Phones weren't just buzzing now. They were ringing. Assistants calling directors, banks calling executives, trading desks calling anyone who might know what was happening to Northbridge's refinancing. Someone near the middle of the table covered his phone and said, "Pre-market is reacting. We're down double digits." Lucas ran both hands through his hair. Is there any way to undo this? The damage isn't financial, I said. It's cultural. Your chairman just demonstrated to everyone watching that this organization treats people like disposable props. That's not something you can undo with better contracts or governance reforms. What happened next was swift and methodical. Boards don't revolt dramatically. They follow procedures, reference bylaws, call emergency sessions. But underneath the corporate language, they were making the same calculation any group makes when survival is at stake. Identify the threat and eliminate it. Owen was placed on administrative leave within the hour. Lucas's appointment was suspended pending a full board review. A crisis management team was assembled to handle investor communications. They tried to salvage something. We can restructure the governance terms, the lead director told me privately. Full transparency? Regular reporting, whatever oversight you require. This isn't about oversight, I said. It's about character. You built a culture where your chairman thought he could humiliate someone publicly and everyone would smile along. I'm not funding that. So, there's no path forward? No, I said. There isn't. That evening, I called Michael from the airport. Dad, I heard something happened with Northbridge today. The stock got hammered, and social media is going crazy about some boardroom video. What did you see? A clip of their chairman refusing to shake hands with someone, being really disrespectful. People are calling it corporate arrogance at its worst. I paused, choosing my words carefully. What did you think of it? Honestly? Made me sick. I was excited about their program, but if that's how they treat people... He trailed off. Dad, you were there today, weren't you? I was. The guy he refused to shake hands with. That was you? It was. Michael was quiet for a long moment. What did you do? What your grandfather would have done, I said. What I hope you'd do in the same situation. Walked away? Walked away. Another pause. How much did it cost us? About $2.5 billion in fees and returns over the next 5 years. Worth it? I thought about my father's philosophy, about character being the foundation you either build on or watch crumble beneath you, about the kind of leaders we choose to fund, and the kind of world we're helping to create. Yeah, I said. It was worth it. The story made national news within 48 hours. Not just the financial impact, but the principle behind it. Social media lit up with discussions about respect in business, about power dynamics, about what happens when consequences finally catch up with behavior. A week later, Michael called to tell me he'd accepted a position with a different firm. Better culture, he said. Better values. The kind of place where handshakes matter. That night, I sat in my father's old study, looking at his Bronze Star citation. The words seemed especially relevant for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his own life above and beyond the call of duty. Sometimes the battlefield is a boardroom. Sometimes the risk is financial rather than physical. But the principle remains the same. There are lines you don't cross, standards you don't compromise, and consequences for those who forget the difference. I held my hand out to greet a new CEO. A chairman decided that was beneath him. He thought the moment was disposable. Turned out it was worth exactly $2.5 billion. In business, as in war, character isn't something you can fake when it matters most. And it always matters most when you think nobody important is watching.